I'll get this started. Andy, thank you for coming. I met Andy when he was the co-founder of CoinList, I believe, which he started. Now you're doing a project called Eco, which is pretty much like kind of a stable coin with yield-bearing stable coin, which is pretty great. And Andy, maybe if you could maybe go over what you're working on for like real quick, and then I think what really helps the students is actually your background. So maybe the decisions you made early on and how you made those decisions, I think, will really help the students. So, yeah, let's rock and roll.
Let's rock and roll. Sure thing. Well, I'll give you the quick story on Eco and what Eco is doing, and then I can talk about kind of how I got here. Eco at a really high level is trying to build what we often call kind of an open rewards currency. So trying to build a new type of money, a new monetary experiment, and seeing how that could evolve. And that is bootstrapped by this really compelling consumer financial product. So we've built this amazing consumer app that replaces people's banks with something better that is usable and targeted towards totally mainstream people. So not crypto people, not trying to build like a new wallet product, but actually just something that's really straightforwardly compelling for mainstream audiences, and using that to then bootstrap adoption of this new monetary experiment, this open rewards currency that we're building. So lots we could talk about there and kind of what that means and how that comes together. But
well, and I'll add, Andy, before we go into your background, I think something that's really awesome, at least to me, about Eco is a lot of the projects in crypto are kind of expanding out of what's currently a narrow circle of like really like people who are really deep on DeFi, like this kind of small number of people who are really, really early adopter into it, and they're just kind of expanding that circle a little bit. Whereas Eco is really focused on kind of like, hey, there's 1 billion people who currently use traditional finance who need something a little bit more mainstream. And so I think in many ways your market is kind of the biggest of all the people that we've talked to, which I think is really exciting. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that. And then maybe, Andy, we can start with, how you, where you went to school, how you decided to become an entrepreneur, the path. I think they'll really appreciate that.
The path, sure thing. So by way of background, I grew up outside of Boston. Was, I think, probably like a lot of people who are in the audience right now, always doing entrepreneurial things, starting websites and marketing firms and all sorts of things like that. I ended up going to Stanford for undergrad, studied math and computer science there. And while I was there, I got super lucky. So I had a professor who is probably familiar to a lot of people here, named Balaji Srinivasan, who went on to become, the co-founded Earn.com, and then became the CTO of Coinbase, and now philosopher king of Twitter, and does all sorts of great stuff. So, but he was my professor at the time, and this was in 2012, and he taught a class called Startup Engineering at Stanford, which was great. And one of the things that Startup Engineering, this class did, and I mention this only because of the context that we're at today, was there were these hackathons every Thursday. So this class every Thursday at 6 p.m., everyone would go to the engineering building and hack all night and build projects, and it was really cool. And there was a group of 6 or 7 of us that always did the whole, like, stayed for 12 hours every night until 6 in the morning and built some really cool stuff. And at the end of the class, that group was like, man, this was great. And Balaji would always stay. He was there the whole time, like would be helping, building stuff. And at the end, we're like, we wish we could keep doing this. And so Balaji told us, listen, he'd obviously been evangelizing Bitcoin to us even at that point. He's like, we should start the Stanford Bitcoin group. That's what this group of people should be. And honestly, we were a little skeptical at the time. We were like, the Bitcoin thing, maybe, we'll see. I'm not totally sold yet. But we did it. And so the 7 of us, and Balaji and another professor named Vijay Pandey started the Stanford Bitcoin group in 2012, 2013. And it was awesome. So we did that for a couple of years, obviously went down the rabbit hole and got super deep and did a bunch of cool research and advocacy work and built some interesting projects. And that's how I got into crypto in the first place. I got really, really lucky there, having Balaji as a professor. I ended up leaving school after my sophomore year to start a company, not actually in the crypto space, in the media space, called Sidewire, and ran that for a few years. Super interesting experience. I'd kind of met a co-founder who was deep in that space and kind of brought the industry expertise, and that was a great experience. And then we ended up winding that down, and I started CoinList in 2017 along with my 4 other co-founders. And we built CoinList into, I think, a great business. Ran token sales for a lot of the top crypto projects in the world. Launched an exchange, launched all sorts of other services, and did that. Then I left CoinList in 2012 to take the reins at Eco. That's how I got here.
I love this, man. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a little bit of a lucky break, but I think a lot of people don't really appreciate how hard it is to kind of stay in the crypto space, you know, even if you get in early, right? So, yeah, you know, there's a joke, you know, someone says, "Hey, I wish I'd bought a Bitcoin at $100," and they say, "Dude, you would have sold at 500." Like, you know, like what?
Which, by the way, I made all of those mistakes, right? First of all, in 2014, I was doing the Stanford Bitcoin Group. I left school to start a company not in crypto, which was idiotic. So I did that for 3 years. I shouldn't have done that. And of course, as with everyone else, I bought a little bit of Bitcoin in 2012, although I was a broke college student, but I bought a little bit. And then of course I sold when it was up 5x or 10x, you know, which is great for me, felt great, but you know, hindsight's 2020. I wish I still had those coins.
I have the exact same experience, and there's a saying, I don't know who says it, but I say it, which is like, your first cycle when, you know, crypto goes up and down, you're like, oh, it's dead. All right, let's move on. But then the second time it goes up, and it goes down again, you're like, oh, no, I saw this before. I'm in here forever. I know it's gonna be back again. So, and I love that. That's literally like a common theme among everybody in crypto who's had more than one cycle. So I think gives you I think it just helps to give you the conviction, right?
Yeah. By the way, just a little anecdote. So I bought a little bit of Bitcoin in 2012, and then, as I said, sold it when it was 5 or 10x. But when I bought that Bitcoin, I also bought my parents and my younger brother, I think it was like 1 Bitcoin each or something like that. And I told them, I bought them this Bitcoin, it was for holidays or something. And I said, here's the deal, I'm going to give you this gift, but you can't sell it for 5 years because I'm super bullish on this thing. So I told them they couldn't sell for 5 years. I then went the next year and sold mine because I was an idiot. Didn't let them sell theirs. And then here we are today, and they're, you know, very happy to have that Bitcoin sitting in their wallet.
What a great, I love that. I did the same thing, but they all sold it, and it happens, you know. It happens to people who sell. Diamond hands, gotta be diamond hands. So Andy, I want to just zoom in a bit on some of your fun decisions. So when you left Stanford, you decided to start a startup, right? How did you decide to do that versus, I'm sure, all of the other amazing tracks, you know, you could have gone to work at Meta or Google, like whatever, right? So like, how'd you navigate that? Maybe if there's anything helpful for the students.
You know, I really do think when a lot of people think of starting a startup as this like momentous, like you're like taking this enormous leap, and you are taking a big leap to do so. But at the same time, I kind of viewed it just as like a job decision at some level. You know, I'm like, okay, I could stay in school, I could leave school and get a job somewhere, I could leave school and start this company. Let's just weigh the options. And there was no part of me that was like, I must start a startup. That must be the thing that I do. I was just like, I'm going to weigh these options and see what I think. And I ended up making the decision that, you know, I had this kind of amazing co-founder that had showed up in my life to build this business, and a really interesting fit. And I was compelled by the problem, and I wasn't getting a whole lot out of school at that point, honestly. And I was like, you know what? I should do this. I should take a swing here. I think it's going to be really interesting. And I'll always be able to get a job at some company making a good salary and being able to do that. I have these skills. I can, you know, do all this stuff. But, you know, this seems like a really amazing opportunity that landed on my doorstep, and I should do that. And so that's how I made the decision then. I think with the benefit of hindsight now having started 3 companies and done this whole cycle a bunch, I was not passionate enough about the problem that we were solving at this first company at Sidewire. I was doing it because I thought it was a really interesting opportunity, a learning opportunity, and all of that. And I picked up a ton of things, and I wouldn't be where I am today without that experience. But I think it's really hard to build a generational business or generational protocol or a generational product if you aren't just deeply, deeply committed to the idea of what you are building, which I am now, and I was at CoinList, but I wasn't so much at Sidewire. And so if I had to do it over, I don't know that I would actually change anything, but I would at least take that more seriously and say, is this the thing that I want to spend years and years of my life just, grinding on and working on 24/7.
I really love that last kind of advice because, at least for me personally, so I did a different thing, I think, which is I went to work at places before I went to do the startup. And when I went to Google, I was there for 2.5, 3 years. Told them I picked a team that wasn't, that could give me a lot of free time. And all I did is research things that could be, that I could go and start to have like a bigger impact. And what's really funny is I looked at so many things. And then I even gave up on the entrepreneur path, and I said, okay, I'm just going to switch teams and like really commit to my career at Google. And then crypto just pulled me out of there was no there was no way I was going to not work on it. Mm-hmm. And the only other time I'd ever felt that is in 2012 and 13 with Bitcoin, right? It's probably similar to you at Stanford. So it's funny because I was so I don't want to say cynical, but I said, I don't think you need to be really passionate about what you're doing. There's no way that the marginal enterprise SaaS founder is passionate about that silly thing. But man, it is nice. I mean, I don't know. Yeah. I really haven't even met an entrepreneur that doesn't really love, in their heart, what they're working on. So I think that's great advice. And so, Andy, moving on, I guess. So I was going to have the students ask questions. Raise your hand if you have a question for Andy. Okay, none yet, but we'll think about. Oh, we got one. So we'll go to that in a second. But Andy, you're basically one of the best entrepreneurs I know. And you're also very broad. You actually don't, you do, obviously you're in crypto, but you think about a lot of different things. And I think that synthesis of all these different concepts from all these different places is what I think separates you from most entrepreneurs I know. And so with that, we're doing a startup competition here. And there's a crypto track and a non-crypto track. They can work on basically anything. And so I'm kind of wondering, from where you are, in the space, but just generally as an entrepreneur, do you have any recommendations, concrete, it can be concrete, hey, you should do this, no one's doing it. Or it can be a space to look at, or, kind of what they should leave to start, kind of like you started with Sidewire, right?
Yeah, really interesting question. There's so much out there to work on. So, there's a bunch of frameworks you can use to think about this problem. One of them is you can look at and try and find where there's severe customer need, right? Where people need something. And another one is you can look at where technology is evolving to a point where there's now new things that are enabled by the technology that you think could be really compelling products. And one framework I love to think about these things in is that, and this comes from actually, I forget where this comes from. I think it's from a book about pitching called Pitch Anything, which is really good. And there's discussion about kind of 3 major secular tailwinds that can drive a business: economic, social, and technological tailwinds. And the most compelling businesses are found where there's an intersection or confluence of a really powerful economic tailwind driving people towards this sort of solution, a really powerful social tailwind or cultural tailwind driving people towards a solution, and a really powerful technological tailwind driving people towards a solution. And so if you look at just to talk the book, since I'm here at a DeSo hackathon, if I was thinking about building, if I was working to build something on the DeSo protocol, I was working to build it the down the middle DeSo social product, right? What I'd be saying, and I think this is true, is listen. Economically, there's something really interesting happening, which is the cost of building things on chain is going down dramatically. Right? That's a powerful economic tailwind for a new type of application to be built in a decentralized way. Socially, we are seeing an enormous backlash against centralized social media company. That's the easy one for DeSo, right? People don't want, there are audiences in pain who do not want to be on these centralized platforms anymore. And technologically, right, there's this new way that you can build decentralized products without actually needing to be an expert in Solidity or Rust or whatever language. So that then points you to pretty fertile ground, right? Where you're okay, all of these tailwinds are supporting me. And just to draw that back to my earlier experience at Sidewire, I was building a business in the media space. And the media space had and has kind of the exact opposite of these dynamics, where it's almost like you're trying to like save a crashing plane in the media industry. Everyone's trying to figure out what's the business model in media, how do we make these things scale, how does that work? And it's really hard. So you're fighting, uphill, and where you'd really like to be is in a place where a rising tide is lifting you in addition to your own efforts. And so those are some of the tailwinds. To make it really practical, that was some like higher order frameworks. To make it really practical, some things that I think are interesting right now. I think that we're seeing the kind of like, obviously there's a bunch of stuff in crypto, but leaving that aside, because we think about that all the time. I think there's some really interesting social trends around health and kind of like bringing biohacking in some sense from this like very niche thing to the mainstream in different ways. You're seeing the rise of a ton of like in the physical world, supplement companies and things like that. And it feels like as a result of that kind of social evolution, there's something to be built there. I don't know exactly what that's going to end up being, but it feels like there's something there. Obviously on the technological evolution side, I'd be remiss not to mention the rise of large language models and what seems possible there. Big question there is what social kind of like trend are you capitalizing on, and what's your moat, and how do you make it really, really defensible? And those are probably two of the first things that come to mind for me outside of, I think, just the increasing innovation of the financial system on crypto rails.
I love, man, what a great and detailed answer. And and I really love because when I was at Google, I was similar, like looking at all these different spaces, and you could kind of immediately tell when a space was like super crusty and like over saturated. Like I think ad tech sticks out as a space I looked at when I was at Google, where it was like, okay, 10 years ago there was stuff to do. Now, like, there's just too many people doing the same stuff. And so I think basically you have some great examples of spaces where it's most likely not overcrowded like that, right? It's kind of low competition, but very soon to be high demand. And I love it. Awesome, man. So we're going to open it up to some questions. I know we have one over here. So let me get him a mic real quick. And
so I wanted to ask a bit about
and say your name so he knows who you
Jackie,
are.
yes.
Jackie, yes.
And I wanted to ask a bit about the Stanford experience, because it seemed that you were very much inspired by a professor which taught an entrepreneurship class back in what year was this?
2012.
2012. That was very early, actually. I mean, Princeton's just recently gotten their sort of entrepreneurship engine running, if you will. But I wanted to ask a bit more about like the way of influence, of how Stanford sort of affected your point of view and in certain ways, right? And basically, like, also about if you could talk a bit more about how you feel about, for example, Elizabeth Holmes or Sam Bankman-Fried recently, right? Because I actually once went to Stanford just to see Sam Bankman-Fried, and that turned out very interestingly in the end. But just wanted to know your point of view with going to the same school as him.
Yeah. Let's see. How did Stanford affect me?
I think also, Andy, Sam Bankman-Fried went to MIT. Just to clear,
my bad.
Just to clear Stanford's name.
His parents do teach at Stanford. Yeah. He grew up at Stanford. There is a connection there for sure.
Not that we're keeping score or anything.
I went to Stanford to see. He was giving a talk at Stanford, which is why I associated with him. My bad.
No, you're all good. His parents do teach there, so it's fair. Well, so I think the number one thing that was super impactful for me, and you have this at Princeton too, although it's a little bit harder, is Stanford is so proximate to like startup culture, right? Princeton has this with New York. It's like a little more of a schlep, but like not that bad. And when you're in school, that is by far the best time to reach out to people and try and start building relationships. And so when I was in school, my first couple of years, my freshman and sophomore year, I spent a ton of time reaching out to founders or operators or executives that I thought were doing cool things and saying, which you'll never be able to say after you graduate, hey, I'm a student and I'd love to connect and chat and get your thoughts on XYZ and whatever. And people are shockingly open to that. And so I spent a ton of time like on the Caltrain going from Stanford to San Francisco, you know, every other week or something, and taking a bunch of meetings and just spending time with people. And those people that I met at that point ended up being, I think, a lot of the people in the network that bootstrapped my ability to fundraise for my first company and, you know, build things out and have a network of people to recruit from and all of that. And the nice thing about Stanford, from my experience, was that it's so in your face, right? Stanford's so immersed in startup culture. There's also obviously stuff going on in Palo Alto, which is the town that Stanford is in, but really a lot of it was in San Francisco. And so it's in your face, and it was kind of obvious for me to take advantage of that. I think when that's not the case, you have to make a little more of an effort and be more proactive about it. But that was one of the biggest things that influenced me. Obviously, also tons of super inspirational classmates and professors and people that have just done or were doing really, really cool stuff. And that was cool too. And then, you know, to the Elizabeth Holmes and, you know, SBF point and all of that, there's always going to be bad apples anywhere you go, and such is life, and you should just try and avoid them and do your best to sense when something's a little off and not get involved. But I don't think that's like, you know, when someone gets admitted to Stanford or Princeton or wherever, it's not like the admissions committee is like doing deep enough diligence to uncover a, you know, fraud 10 years in the future. And so, you know, it's just something that unfortunately has to happen sometimes. But yeah, number one thing I would say is just leverage your student status while you have it to get in touch with people and start building relationships, and yeah, just build that out.
And I'll actually compound that answer by saying that when I was a student at Princeton, I actually really wished that we had kind of the access that the people at Stanford like Andy had, right? And that's part of why we're doing this, right? Is so that we can bring it here to you guys, even though we're not really close to a lot of these people. And I think it's great for you guys to take advantage of it. You know, if you email any of these speakers, you can DM, and if they should respond, but if they don't, you can DM me and I'll make sure they respond, and I'll, yeah, you hear that, Andy? I'm coming.
Yeah, with a baseball bat or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say too, you know, just to say this, like, if you email people, if you set a date where, you know, you're at Princeton and you're like, all right, I'm going to go to New York for a night, and I'm going to schlep myself over there and get some hotel room and stay for a night and try and fill my 2 days of meetings, which is, again, acknowledged, not trivial. It's not like you're like leaving town, you're just going over to town. It's like a whole effort. If you email people in New York who work at businesses that you like with thoughtful emails, and you say, hey, I'm a Princeton student, I'm driving, whatever, training the X hours to New York to come for 2 days in a month, and I just really want to meet people that are doing things that I can see myself doing in the future, 70% of people will reply and set a meeting for those days, because it demonstrates a level of commitment. And so, like, you should take advantage of that while you have it. It gets much harder once you graduate. It's still possible, but much harder once you graduate, and you no longer have that kind of student halo around you.
Thank you, Andy. That was great.
Anyone else have a question? You have the same watch as me. I love it. Casio. All right.
Yeah, I know Eco offers a kind of high yield saving bank, like an alternative to savings accounts with banks. But I know like products like and companies like Celsius have kind of left bad taste in a lot of people's mouths with these yield products. And in general, I think a lot of the yield products are dialing back the interest rates that they were giving. And I suppose I just want to ask about that, and like how much risk do you take? How do you offer this 2.5% yield, and how have you responded to all of these other yield products kind of having to dial back in the likes of Celsius?
Yeah, so Eco at this point does not lend out user funds. So user funds are not lent out; they're not at risk. They're sitting there in accounts for the benefit of the user, and that is, you know, we have been totally unimpacted by, you know, Celsius, Gemini, all FTX, all of these blowups because of that. And so that's put us in, there's certainly downsides, right? There's kind of consumer confidence is shaken in upstart fintech products for sure. But on the flip side, we've actually put ourselves in a really strong position for user acquisition where we just haven't blown up, right? And we've been a survivor through all this mess and are in a position to not blow up. And that, you know, the question then becomes, well, okay, like, where's that money come from, right? How's Eco paying these yields if it's not lending out user funds? And the answer to that is twofold. One important piece is that, so just practically, we are subsidizing that by lending out our own corporate balance sheet and paying rewards out of that. And right now, U.S. Treasuries are at 4.3 to 4.8%. You can earn great yield putting your money in U.S. Treasuries as a corporation or an individual, obviously, and we use that to pay out to users, so it's subsidized. And the reason for that, like I said, is twofold. One is that our business model is not to skim from customers. And this is a critical distinction, right? All of these yield products and really every consumer financial product, their business model is to do things with customer money and take a slice off of it, whether that's interest margin or interchange or just charging customers fees or whatever. That's not our business model. Our business model is to make this open rewards currency that I was talking about, these eco points, successful. And we could get into like the actual mechanics of that and how that works. But at a really high level, the way to think about that is that, and this is a fun fact, United Airlines, big airline, United Airlines Mileage Plus rewards loyalty program business is worth more, has a higher enterprise value than United Airlines itself. These loyalty programs are big business, and that's an opportunity for us to build something that's much more aligned with the customer. And the second thing is, we've raised a lot of money. We're in a super comfortable financial position. And we just decided we should subsidize these yields for now in the interest of focusing on building other products. We will build, in fact, we'll launch this year, ways for users to actually directly earn yield. So putting your money into U.S. Treasuries or into a actually high yield kind of savings account or all sorts of different things. But those things are lower on the priority list for us because we're happy and able to subsidize those yields right now in advance of building those features, and instead focus our efforts on building other things that are more valuable for the customer.
And I'll also add that I think a really big distinction that's important between TradFi and everything that in crypto, like what Andy's doing, is kind of the transparency, right? So like, I think banks, you put your money there and it's just assumed, oh yeah, we'll just lend it out. They don't even tell you, right, where it's going, give no transparency. Whereas in crypto with Eco and all the other products that I think you would ever use in crypto, right, it's very much like, oh, hey, you're doing this thing and you're getting this for it. And
right.
I think that's the future, right?
We talk about it as like user-directed yield. Like the user should know exactly what they're doing to get that yield.
Yeah, exactly. And Andy, thank you so much, man. And is there any way, what's the best way for them to learn more about Eco or to be involved?
Eco, there's two sides to Eco. And if you want to go deep, one place to start is eco.com, just eco.com, which is all about this consumer fintech product. And then the other place is eco.org, which is a different website, which is all about this open rewards currency and kind of monetary experiment that we're running. So eco.com, eco.org, lots of interesting information on there.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much for coming, Andy. Everybody, round of applause.